by for Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors with your host, Drew Kirby.
Hey, this is Luke Combs.
I am Morgan Wallen.
I'm Riley Green.
I'm Travis Denning.
Hey, I'm Aaron Lewis.
Hey, it's Luke Bryan.
I'm Tim McGraw.
What's up? This is Ian Munsick.
Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.
Another great week, another opportunity for us to bring in Wyoming Game and Fish Department to really highlight something that's been going on since 2017. That, Janet, I think this is probably one of the highlights of over the last 6 years, and that's bringing the Sauger back.
You know, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department does a lot for native fish restoration, and I'm sure that a lot of listeners know a ton about our cut slam. You can travel across the state and catch the four subspecies of native cutthroat trout in their native waters. And so it's a pretty popular program. We have hundreds of people who do it every year, and it's kind of neat to get that certificate. But I think sometimes we forget that, we do a lot of other restoration work. For example, for those of you that love the walleye, we have reintroduced its cousin, the Sauger, which was native, clear back in the 1850s in the North Platte River. And we have with us today our fisheries biologist for the portion that we're reintroducing of the North Platte River, Nick Coburg.
Nick, this is exciting. It really is. And last year I had a couple of opportunities to be in a boat where a Sauger was caught. And, the excitement that the guys get off of being able to catch a fish like this is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad to hear people are enjoying the fish. We've been really encouraged to see them take as well as they have in the North Platte River and Glendo Reservoir. And I'm glad to see, anglers also enjoy having them back in the system.
We were all talking a little bit earlier that the history of the Sauger here in central Wyoming, it really goes back to when Fort Laramie was active.
Yeah. So, clear back in the mid 1800s, the 1850s or so, they're a major food source in Fort Laramie. I mean, how great is that we can look back and see these historical records and know that the North Platte River had Sauger at that time frame.
Nick, you've been hands-on in this entire process, and it has to make you feel pretty good also when you know that they're taken back to the North Platte and really making it their home again.
Yeah, sure. And I guess I have to acknowledge that I've been in this job only for the last 2 years, and all the legwork for this reintroduction started several predecessors ago, really back in the mid 2000s with, trying to find a source and trying to understand what all the moving parts would be with the reintroduction. And so in some ways I'm getting to do the coolest part of work that other people, struggled for years to make happen. So I feel fortunate about that.
Do you have a ballpark estimate on about how many Saugers are running right now through the North Platte and Glendo?
So in April and May especially, it seems like we can catch them pretty easily in the river upstream of Glendo with our electrofishing gear. And it's predominantly mature, so 3 to 5 year old fish that are that up in the river. I think a lot of the smaller ones spend more time in the reservoir. But I couldn't even guess at a number of how many there might be. But, we can easily electrofish 30 or 50 a day. When we go out and look, especially that time of year. And I've gotten reports of several that anglers are catching in the reservoir in the spring as well.
You guys have been stocking these since 2017. What was the process leading up to that? I know you had mentioned that you kind of came in late in the game, but the process of finding them and getting the ball rolling.
Yeah, so as you and probably a lot of listeners know, our hatchery system in Wyoming is geared toward producing a lot of cold water species, especially various types of trout. And so whenever we want to stock what we term a cool or warm water fish like walleye or sauger or any like crappie and sunfish, we have to negotiate trades with other states that have the infrastructure to make those fish. And so a big part of that scoping was just finding a source that was producing sauger and then ideally matching it with a river source and a source that was coming from a similar climate, various considerations like that make it more likely to be successful. So, that took several years to dial in exactly where the fish would come from and how many we could get and what size we could stock them out and things like that. So then once that was all worked out, we agreed to what we initially wanted was a 5-year introduction where we would stock every year for 5 years and then take time off so we could watch what they do and then more easily detect any wild sauger that were spawned, by not stocking them anymore. Unfortunately, the first year in 2017, we weren't able to get nearly as many fish as we hoped. There was some issues in the production end. So we ended up stocking them for 6 years in a row, with 2022 being the last year. And so now we're going to take some time off to wait and see if we have any wild sauger show up in the next few years.
And you guys have ways to track certain fish throughout the way you have them tagged and electronics in them so that you can read the progress and where they're going.
That's right, Drew. It's really kind of neat. We talk a lot about this show about kind of those, the big game, the things that we can all see. And so we talk about collaring and how, we watch what all these animals do across migration routes. It's the same with fish. And that's what's really neat is we were able to use that technology to learn more about what sauger we're doing.
Yeah. So starting last year in 2022, I began a radio telemetry project with sauger and 3 other fish species that were going to give us a better idea of their movement from Glendo up into the North Platte River, and more specifically, which barriers or low-head dams in the river were passage issues for these species. So last year I put radio tags in 27 sauger, and then I'm going to put about that many more tags out this spring in 2023. And that project will continue through at least the end of 2024 before transmitter batteries start dying, to get a better picture of what migration looks like in the river and whether certain barriers like the Oran Weir are a considerable impediment to their use of the river.
When you're using these tags, obviously it's not harmful to the fish, but if someone were to catch one of these fish, what should they do? What should be the process then?
Just from a legal standpoint, it's not any different than any other fish that they would catch of that species. Obviously in terms of my project and the work that goes into marking fish, I would prefer the tagged fish that have radio tags be released back to the water alive, just to save the effort and get more information from those fish while they're alive. It's obviously up to the angler to make that choice, but if they do choose to harvest the fish, or if it's mortally hooked or whatever and it doesn't make sense to release it, there's an external tag on the dorsal fin with a phone number. I'd love to meet up and find a way to get the radio tag back so that I can put it back in another fish.
And Drew, on our website, you can go into the search bar and type in sauger, and some news releases and some videos from our YouTube channel will pop up, and you can see Nick do these fantastic surgeries on these fish to insert these tags. And so that might give anglers a little bit more perspective on the effort that is going in to kind of track these native species and what Nick means by, it would be kind just to release it again to save a little bit of work. It's pretty awesome to watch these guys do stitches.
You had mentioned that last year was the last year that you'll be stocking for a couple of years. How long are you going to give it until you guys will restock again?
Well, that's to be determined. I mean, the whole point of not stocking for a few years is to let off, and so that in the coming years, if we start seeing young, small sauger, we know that they're not the product of stocking and that those fish are spawning and recruiting successfully. If we see that successful recruitment, I would guess we probably will not stock again. Kind of anecdotally, last year we saw the first adult sauger in the river that had mature eggs. And so we have some pretty good, solid anecdotal evidence, at least, that they did spawn last year. So hopefully, like by next year, at least, those fish should be showing up.
Well, again, if you haven't learned a lot about the sauger and you want to find out more about it, WGFD.wild.gov is a great way to go and find out more information, and definitely watch those videos. And very quickly, as we're moving along here in the show, the sauger, they're cousins to the walleye. How much do they look like walleye, Nick?
Yeah, that's one thing we hear a lot, and it's true. They're so closely related that they do have a lot of similarities, and especially just from a silhouette view, they're very similar. And so the primary differences are all based on coloration. So the Sauger will always have rows of dark circular or crescent-shaped spots on its dorsal fin. And walleye don't have that, even though some do have some pigment on their dorsal fin. It won't be the rows of little dots. And then the final biggest thing or bigger thing is the tail fin on a walleye has that characteristic white tip on the lower lobe that everybody I think has probably seen who walleye fishes.
Will the size of a sauger and walleye be different, or are they close enough related that a sauger will grow as big as a walleye?
Generally, there's a ton of overlap in the size that you'll see. I think if you look through a bunch of historical data throughout Wyoming, that like walleye will often reach a larger top size. But if you look at the whole range of sizes of all the intermediates, I mean, they overlap probably 98%. So it's not a really a size difference that you can rely on.
And since we're trying to reintroduce these and make them repopulate themselves, are there regulations on these fish when you catch them of how many you can keep and the size?
Yep, absolutely. So across the whole state of Wyoming, the Sauger regulation is the same. So whether you're fishing in the Wind River drainage or the Powder or the North Platte, you're allowed 2 Sauger in your bag or possession, and there's no size restriction. And so it's obviously a lot more restrictive than walleye because they are a native species that we're trying to conserve and enhance their populations. So we do have a more restrictive harvest regulation.
Awesome. Well, if you want to find more information out, you can go to wgfd.wyo.gov. Nick, Janet, thank you.
Yep,
Thanks,
you, Drew.
Game and Fish, of course, every week on this program. We'll have them back on another great topic next week. And if you want to find out more information about Sauger, you can hit them up inside the website, wgfd.wyo.gov. We continue with Brian Woodward from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports next.
It's Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.
Welcome back. It's Drew along with Brian Woodward from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports on Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors. And Brian, this week, ups and downs. It was nice weather, then it snowed, and then nice weather again.
Yeah, it was really nice. We had the biathlon guys here in town. They were competing, I guess, I think part of the Olympic team qualifications. And they got a nice, fresh little dumping of snow and kind of made things interesting up there.
It's interesting how much we take it for granted that is right here in our backyard. We had people here from all over the country, and they were just raving about how great it is up on Casper Mountain.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see how much effort they put into just maintaining and grooming those courses and the number of shooting stations that they had. I don't think most of us even realized that it was there.
And obviously doing an event like that or being snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, you got to have the proper apparel. You don't want to be too hot. You don't want to be too cold or restricted.
Yeah, we had quite a few people that, maybe we were expecting to be super cold and we're layered up a little bit too much, and we're coming in and scaling down a little bit. The sun came out and the big W held out for us, so it wasn't terrible up there for them. And we've got everything that they needed to kind of get them through.
On the other hand, we're hoping for nice weather so we can get out on the boats on the open water. And you guys are in getting your reels and rods all stocked up, and you're ready to go for the fishing season.
Yeah, we've been talking boat prep quite a bit. So, I jumped in my boat the other day and realized, I needed a few more Plano boxes. I had some stuff that was, maybe in some shopping bags from the winter months where I thought I needed more stuff. And then just looking at respooling a bunch of my fishing poles and just getting ready for that first open water.
Doing that, being prepared is one thing, but you get a little anxious because you want to get out on the water, but not quite yet. And obviously during all this preparing, and there are some items that you make sure you always put in your boat that maybe you always have. What are a couple that you have?
One of the things that I was going through my boat is, I've got a set of rain gear. Actually, I've got a set of some guide wear that's kind of a insulated guide wear. Again, you're going to want to be able to layer up a little bit. I've got mine just in a dry bag that I throw under a seat, get nice waterproof tops and bottoms, maybe a nice knit hat, and maybe some gloves, just to break that wind a little bit, because those first couple trips on the water, they can be grueling with the wind and whatnot.
And when April comes in a little while, not only are we excited about fishing, but turkey hunting will begin not long after that. And we're going to have the National Wild Turkey Federation on with us. And you guys are pretty stocked up with all the guns and camo and ammo.
Yeah, we've got shotguns that'll basically handle just about any age level and any experience level. But one of the more popular ones that we've been selling quite a few of is just a single shot Rossi Tuffy turkey. And it's great for a youth hunter. It's good just to kind of pack in the back of a side-by-side. It's small, it's compact. You can rig it up with a scope. If you really want to take it's a pretty inexpensive shotgun, but a lot of times we're putting a $200 or $300 piece of optics on top, maybe a nice reflex sight or a red dot sight. They look pretty cool, and really they're pretty price conscious.
Another piece of equipment that a turkey hunter or duck hunter, pheasant hunter may get is a choke tube. And what do you guys carry choke tube wise?
Yeah, we primarily carry Carlson's choke tubes, but a lot of people are shooting the TSS out of those shotguns. They're pretty effective for turkeys up to 40, 50, 60 yards. So the biggest thing when you're running that TSS or that steel shot is not to constrict that choke too much. You need to at least be shooting a modified choke. If you're shooting a full choke, that steel shot and that new tungsten stuff just really doesn't have any give, and you can blow out a barrel. So be cautious on that.
Let's kind of go back on these choke tubes a little bit and explain what they're used for and what different types there are.
Yeah, so a full choke is obviously the tightest pattern that can have, and then there's probably 8 or 9 different choke styles all the way up to cylinder bore, which basically is just as wide open as you can get. So most people for most hunting applications will run a modified, but it's good to pattern your gun. Grab a target, grab a piece of cardboard. Get out there and see what it looks like at 30, 40 yards and get an idea of, the shell that you're shooting, see how many of those BBs are, whether it's shooting a little high or high to the left or shooting it to the right. Every shotgun's a little bit different, and every box of ammo is a little bit different. So getting out there and patterning it just to make sure. A lot of people will take a look at how many pellets they're getting in a 2-foot radius at 30 yards, and gives you an idea of what your shot pattern is going to be when you actually pull the trigger on that turkey.
Well, if you're interested and you want to find out more information, come on in, Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. Also, you've got calls, you've got camo, you've got everything you need. Come on in, check it out.
It's Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.
It's Drew and Brian back. Rocky Mountain Discount Sports on Wyoming, hooking and hunting outdoors. And you went this week and you got the itch. You went and got to your boat. You started looking through it and combing through it and make sure no mice didn't eat your wires or anything like that. It's a sad, sad world when the mice are eating the wires.
Oh yeah, we're all good there, but someone's gonna have that problem, guaranteed. It was either a rabbit or a mouse or something.
When you were doing that, did you stumble across anything? You mentioned that you had to get some extra Plano boxes because you found some extra goodies that you found and had from earlier in the winter. And is there anything else that really jumps at you that every year you need to make sure?
This whole winter we've been talking about batteries, right? And I had my boat plugged in, and I've been resetting the onboard charger to make sure that those batteries maintain a good charge. But apparently I had 2 batteries, and they just happened to be starting batteries that had just given up the ghost. So yeah, those had to be repaired or replaced. But the one thing I would say is that there's not a whole lot of options for the batteries that I'm using in my boats in Casper. And so there are places that sell them, but everybody was out of stock on them. Right. If you think that you're just going to be able to go down to O'Reilly's and pick yourself up a 31 series AGM for your Verado, you're probably going to have to order it. So give yourself a little bit extra time when you get the chance to get the boat out there. If your onboard charger is not maintaining those batteries well enough, throw a regular charger on them and try to give them a good jolt and see if the batteries will come back to life. But there's a good chance, I mean, these batteries I've had in my boat were 5 years old, which is really good for these types of batteries, and especially in the conditions that we put them through. And I kind of figured I was going to have to replace a few batteries, and sure enough, I did.
The planning part out of it is the good part, but the fact you had to go spend a couple $100 on batteries is not something most people can do just on the fly like that.
Well, it was nice that I found it in the garage as opposed to at the boat ramp.
Yeah.
So, yeah, don't be that guy.
Also, when you're combing through your boat, there's a lot of safety gear that you have to have. If you get approached by a game warden or a member of Game and Fish, they're going to ask for a few certain things to make sure that you have, and life jackets and fire extinguishers, and if you don't have a horn, you got to have whistles and horns and all kinds of stuff. So
a throw cushion's another big one.
Just making sure that you have all the standard stuff before you head out.
Yeah, the other thing, as I was noticing, I was pulling some rods out of the rod locker, and of course I had some late fall presentations still, on my rods. And as I'm taking off the jigging wraps and checking my line, I was realizing that a lot of my line's getting kind of brittle. So, now it's going to be down to stripping line off those reels and getting them restrung.
So when you go through a boat situation like that, so maybe you go 2 or 3 years before you do a swap out of all the line, or you do that every year?
No, I swap mine out twice a year almost.
Do you?
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, a lot of my jigging rods, you'll get snagged up enough throughout the year that the spool will get down where it just isn't casting very well, or maybe it's just got twisted so much that it's just not performing the way you want it to. So, especially if I'm getting ready for a big tournament or something, I don't want to have brittle line. It's pretty inexpensive to swap out line. It's way better to do that than to lose a fish at the boat because it snapped off.
I can remember as a kid when my grandpa would restring his rods and reels that he would have some little setup that was perfect for him. I believe it was a pencil between his toes.
That's the one.
And he just spun it right on through. But as modern technology has moved on, they've actually come out with a little easier way maybe to do that kind of a situation.
It's a lot easier just to bring your spools into Rocky Mountain and just have us do them.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
Honestly, it's it gets on there nice and tight, and it gets spooled on there. You only pay for what you get spooled on there. You don't have any waste at the end of a spool. So I tend to do most of mine. Just take them off, bring them to the store, get them done.
Which that makes it really simple, but
yeah.
It's not as fun as the pencils between the toes.
Right, but how many times were you chasing the spool because it slipped off the pencil or burned your hands? Or
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's the boat prep. We've got the end of next month. We're about 30 days away. Alcova Tough Man Tournament, North Platte Walleyes is putting on. So that's coming up, and that's usually, hopefully we'll have ice off, but the conditions usually are pretty rough. Could be cold. Could be super nice as well. So making sure the boats are prepped, safety equipment's working, make sure the boat's registered, make sure you got your insurance, all those little things that we don't think about. It's a good time to just spend time to get it organized.
And make sure you come in here, and if maybe you have a few rods that need upgraded, you can check it out here at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports, or if you just need new line, come on in and do that.
Yeah, there's we talked a few weeks ago, Pure Fishing, Berkeley came out with a bunch of new crankbaits this last year. The Money Badger's one that is really intriguing to me. The Hit Stick's another one. There's some new plastics out there. They've got the new HD Ripple Shads. That's gonna be pretty good. I've always liked the Ripple Shads, especially down at Glendo. So some of those new colors are catching my eye.
Don't forget your fishing license. If you're going to do the turkey hunt like we were talking about, you got to make sure that you've got the license for that and the stamps and all the goodness there. So come on out and check it out here at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.
Welcome in to Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors. And springtime's a great time of the year. Obviously, everybody trying to get out on the water and do some fishing, but also we're not far away from turkey hunting going, so I thought who better to talk with than Jason Tarwater, Regional Director of the Wild Turkey Federation. And man, Jason, you're a busy guy. You go all over the country. And one of the biggest annual banquets is the national banquet for the Turkey Federation there in Nashville, which just happened a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it's one of the largest, if not the largest, outdoor shows in the country. This year was even more impressive. This is our 50th anniversary as an organization, so obviously there was a lot of excitement built around it. We shattered attendance records, fundraising records. I think we topped 67,000 people. Wow. Over the course of a few days. We kind of took over the town of Nashville, it seemed like. But, yeah, it's a busy time of year for us between convention. This is what we call our banquet season, so this is the main fundraising portion of the year for us for a few months in the spring right before turkey season and getting into turkey season. So, everybody's running 100 miles an hour right now, that's for sure.
With that national convention in Nashville, you have the Nashville community there, which – a lot of the country singers and the producers and the record folks are all turkey hunters. And really, everybody comes there because it's such a big deal. There's so many people that love turkey hunting. Yeah,
no, it's a cool place to do it. It's a fun place to do it. We always have some country music artists that are part of it. Riley Green was kind of our headliner this year for our Saturday night dinner. We've had some really good shows in the past, but yeah, we picked it specifically for that. It's an entertaining city.
How does the National Wild Turkey Federation help conservation? I mean, you guys draw that many people and you do all these banquets, so that means you guys are giving back a lot.
We're probably one of the most successful conservation groups when it comes to actually putting money on the ground and getting projects done. And some of our big things that we do, we have a huge outreach program, getting kids and women and even just non-hunting adults into the outdoors. We're big into, access, like for instance, in Wyoming, Access Yes is a big deal for a lot of people to allow access for hunting. And we give a huge percentage every year of our funding capabilities to that program. Obviously habitat is vital, not only for wild turkeys, but for, grouse and deer and elk and, all the species. And, we probably cover it all if you really stop and think about it. So I think that's why our national show is such a success, as people realize, not only are we working for the wild turkey across the country, but we're kind of working for all the outdoorsmen, recreationists, all species of wildlife.
The National Wild Turkey Federation is so big and popular. Would you say that's because there's turkey hunting pretty much all over the country? You're not hunting mule deer everywhere. You can't hunt moose everywhere or elk, but turkey, they're everywhere.
Yeah, it's a really good introductory sport to get into hunting too, just because, typically tags are a lot less expensive. Like you said, opportunities everywhere, every state but Alaska has a turkey hunting season. Even Hawaii, Hawaii is actually becoming very popular to vacation and go on a turkey hunt. We've put a lot of effort, in several years. And like I mentioned, this is our 50th anniversary. There's a lot of states that didn't have wild turkeys or a turkey hunting season 50, 60 years ago. And, Wyoming's one of them. Where I live here in Montana, a lot of the western states didn't have turkeys or turkey season. But with the efforts of us, with the state and federal land agencies, the habitat is there, obviously, to support wild turkeys, and there's not really too many negative downsides to introducing them or reintroducing them. And so there's a lot of opportunity across the country now that wasn't there, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
What kind of work goes into introducing turkeys into, say, Wyoming, when, you said that they weren't really here, but then now there seems to be a plenty of turkey?
Yeah, the main thing is evaluating habitat. The birds not only need a place to nest and raise their broods after they hatch, but one of the big limiting factors in Wyoming for turkeys is surviving the winters that we have. Typically, some type of ag has to be around. There's a lot of birds that make a living in the winter unfortunately, off of haystacks and feedlots and things like that. And that's where sometimes they'll get a little bit of a bad name for themselves. But they've got to be able to make it through the winter, and there's got to be a food source around, especially when we get heavy snows and the cold weather. Where the habitat is suitable for those birds to live year round in Wyoming, there's birds there. State did a good job of putting birds where they thought they could make it, and in a lot of cases they've thrived.
And downtown Casper is one of those locations.
There's a few places where they do get a bad name for themselves. Downtown Casper, up in the Sheridan, Buffalo area, they're in the foothills of the Bighorns, kind of the same boat. Those one-offs are kind of comical at times. They can be a pain in the butt at times too, but yeah, it's just the nature of the beast, I guess.
When you do see them, I mean, that makes you confident if you're a turkey hunter to know that this area is suitable for the turkeys to survive.
Yeah, no, when you're seeing them in areas like that, that tells you that there's, more wild birds somewhere around once you get out of town. And that's the case with Casper. That Laramie Range south of town and the foothills and things like that has birds. And in fact, further south of that is one of the first, if not the first, introduction of the wild turkey was in the Laramie Range, obviously years ago.
One of the interesting things talking to folks here in the Casper area is there are guys that really haven't had much experience with the hunting. It really hasn't caught on hunting-wise for a lot of folks, even bird hunters that are pheasant hunting or duck hunting every year.
Yeah, and it's kind of still a new thing in a lot of the western states. And I see the same thing here in Montana as it's actually taking off as being more popular spring activity. So it's really cool to see. It's helping us, throughout our volunteer ranks too, is you get more people that are more interested in turkey hunting. So they're reaching out to our local chapters, asking how they can help out, what they can do. In all reality, compared to, in the Midwest or the eastern states, it's relatively a new thing, turkey hunting is. And it's, like I said, it's really cool to see that happening.
For those that maybe are just thinking about starting and going to go out this year for the first time, what are some things they need to really keep in mind when you're going out to hunt these turkeys?
Try to keep it simple. I mean, you can get wrapped up just like elk hunting or anything else. You can get wrapped up into a lot of excess detail, but turkeys have, very keen eyesight, and that's the main thing. Camo obviously is crazy important when it comes to turkey hunting. Gloves, face mask. I mean, they can see the shine of your skin. That'll spook them. I've seen that happen. Finding the birds is the biggest challenge. They're not everywhere. Typically earlier in the season, they're still kind of in their little winter groups, pockets. Biggest thing I tell people when it comes to trying to locate them is if you have an idea of where there might be birds, it's no different than trying to locate elk in September. Find a high spot, find a place where you can hear long distances. Birds will actually, starting about right now through the entire season, they're gobbling like crazy on the roosts, establishing their pecking order and dominance. So early mornings at sunrise, finding the high spots where you can hear on a clear morning, those gobbles will carry for quite a ways. That's typically the easiest thing when it comes to locating them. Getting on down to some more finer details, obviously you want to get a shotgun that patterns well. There's all kinds of targets that you can buy to help you do that. YouTube can be your friend when it comes to different things with turkey hunting. But yeah, the biggest thing is locating them.
Awesome. Jason Tarwater, National Wild Turkey Federation. Now, we've found the turkeys, so how do you call them in? Jason gives us some tips coming up on Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors. Hey there, it's Drew. You can always hit us up in the My Country 95.5 app if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. We're talking with Jason Tarwater from the National Wild Turkey Federation. And Jason, we were mentioning about hunting turkeys, and you see a difference of turkeys in the fall and turkeys in the spring.
The main difference is in the spring, these birds are going through their mating rituals. So they're a lot more talkative. The difference between that and in the fall, you're typically finding big flocks, maybe setting up in front of them, ambush points, spot and stalk type of a thing. In the spring, which my personal opinion is the best time of year to turkey hunt. You're interacting with the birds, calling them, using that mating ritual time frame kind of to your advantage. It's a lot more fun to me, and people that, I don't think there's too many people that would disagree that are avid turkey hunters. I mean, it's no different than chasing down a bugling bull and trying to get him to come into archery range or something like that.
So what kind of a call can a beginner look at and be able to pick up quickly? I mean, you mentioned YouTube earlier. That obviously is going to be a real big assist on your part.
A couple of the easiest ones are that I always try to recommend is box calls. They're pretty self-explanatory. They're easy to run and operate. What they call pot calls, which can be a surface of either slate or glass. There's a few other styles out there. A slate call is probably also one of the easiest. That's what I always try to recommend to beginners. If somebody is used to elk hunting, and calling elk with the diaphragm call, a mouth call, that's my go-to. I've been doing it a long time. But if you're used to running one, it's just a little bit different pitch and tone. And anybody that's ran elk calls before can pick up on a diaphragm call pretty quickly, typically. Morning hunt, midday hunt, evening hunt. Is there a better part of the day? Early in the season, the birds are still in pretty big flocks. Toms might have, groups of anywhere from 5, 6 to 20 hens flocked up, just like an elk would with his harem of cows. It can be a little tougher sometimes. They haven't been called out a lot, which is good, but it's really hard to pull a tom from, a big group of live hens. But as season progresses, when birds fly down in the morning, hens start leaving to go sit on nests throughout the day. Some of my favorite time frames have been, after 10 o'clock in the morning when that starts happening. Sometimes you can find those toms out by themselves. Their hens ran off. They lost them, something like that. And then also later in the season. I mean, I hunt in April. I don't get really excited until about that May time frame because, for one, with our weather, your odds of getting better weather, at least in May, are a lot better. The other reason is a lot of those hens have been bred. They're kind of dispersed now. They're not in big flocks, and so it's a lot easier to find a tom by himself, looking for maybe that last remaining hen that hasn't been bred. Typically, they're a lot easier to call in. I prefer midday and towards the last half of the seasons typically.
Now, Jason, are you using shotgun or are you into the archery turkey hunts?
I've done both. I've gone back and forth. I went through a little spell of archery only for a while, just for the added challenge. Anymore with the way my scheduling is with banquets and being on the road, I like to be more efficient. And there are several times if I would have had a shotgun in my hand instead of my bow, I could have put a tag on a bird. So anymore, I typically I'm running around with a shotgun in my hands. I have scaled down. I use a 20 gauge anymore just because they're lighter to carry around. With the technology of the shotgun shells these days and choke tubes, things like that, you can still be very, very deadly with even a 20 gauge. And there's guys that are now their challenges, 410s, which is cool. You just got to know your limits like everything else.
Well, really excited, Jason, that you spent some time with us and really appreciate you doing that because, like we mentioned, a lot of people haven't really jumped into the turkey hunting yet, but hopefully we can get them fired up. And like you said, it's so much easier to get a tag or a license for turkey hunting than it is for a big game.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an opportunity sport. I've always tell people, if you like elk hunting in September, like try turkey hunting and don't be afraid to get away from the ranches and the feedlots where you see them in the winter all grouped up, because in a lot of people's eyes that's not much of a hunt. It's not much of a fun hunt. But if you wait later in the year, those birds disperse away from those feed sites, and that's when you can really chase them around the hills. And it's just like a spring elk hunt with a heck of a lot easier pack out if you do kill one.
Yeah, no doubt. Jason Tarwater, Regional Director of the National Wild Turkey Federation. You want more info, go to nwtf.org. Jason, man, thanks again, and definitely want to talk to you again down the road and see how you fare this spring.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, and anytime, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jason. Jason Tarwater, Wild Turkey Federation. A big thanks to Brian Woodward and Rocky Mountain Discount Sports, along with Brooks Company, for making this show possible. Now remember, you can catch all of our shows on demand in our station's app. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next time on Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.
Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors with Drew Kirby. If you have a question, want to make a comment, or have an idea for a show topic, message us on the My Country mobile app. Wyoming Hooking and Hunting Outdoors.